Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're exploring something really specific, 19th century Silesia, particularly the Biro parish under Prussian rule.
And we've got some fascinating material to work with.
Yes, this is all drawn from Bironki Notebook number 27, which was put together by Wojsława Kortynowska. It gives such a vivid snapshot.
It really does. You see, when Prussia took over Silesia, they found, well, a real mix of school systems left over from the Habsburg times before 1742.
So basically, a bit of a mess. Reforms were definitely needed.
Definitely. And our mission today is to sort of unpack the impact of the big Prussian school reforms, what they wanted to achieve versus, what actually happened on the ground.
Okay, let's get into it. So Prussian goals in Silesian education, what were they aiming for right after annexation?
Well, two main things, really starkly put. First, integrate the locals with the rest of Prussia. And second, crucially, rapid Germanization.
Right, the source material mentions that observation that everything was Polish in this area.
Exactly. So the Prussians saw elementary schools as the primary vehicle, the main tool for getting the German language in there.
Makes sense from their perspective. Were there specific laws backing this up early on?
Oh, yes. School regulations came out in 1765 and 1801. But the policy wasn't static. After the revolutions of 1848, things shifted.
How so?
The 1854 regulations, they really focused on obedience, submission to the state. Rote learning became a big part of that.
A bit different from just teaching German.
A definite shift in emphasis. It contrasts quite sharply with the later 1872 regulations, the Allgemeine Bestimmungen, which, well, they loosened the reins a little, allowed schools more freedom to develop.
Interesting evolution. So, okay, state goals are clear. How did they try to make this happen? Mandatory attendance was a big one, wasn't it?
Huge. Compulsory schooling for kids aged 6 to 13, and there were teeth to it, initially anyway. Fines for parents if kids didn't attend.
Fines. And I read you could even work off those fines.
You could, for the commune. It really underscores the economic pressures people were under.
But even with rules and fines, attendance wasn't exactly stellar.
Far from it. That's a key insight here. There were huge exceptions built in, especially around farming. Older kids could be gone from April to November.
Wow, most of the year.
Pretty much the whole growing season.
Mm.
And poor kids who worked might only go for an hour a day in winter. So, despite the rules looking strict on paper,
The reality was,
attendance stayed really low for a long time. Like maybe only 20 to 35% were regularly attending in the first 50 years. For many rural families, earning money just had to come first.
that figure, 20-35%, really hits home. What about what they learned? The curriculum must have changed too.
It did, quite dramatically over time. Initially, super basic. Reading and writing in Polish, some arithmetic,
Yeah.
and religion.
Okay, the essentials.
Right, but between about 1835 and 1845, Prussians added subjects like geography, history, nature studies. Then came gymnastics from 1859, but more common in the 1870s.
Gymnastics. Interesting.
And later, sports in 1892. Interestingly, sports practice was often linked to practicing German.
Ah, tying it back to the language goal. And didn't the 1872 reforms bring another big curriculum shift?
A massive one, yes. The idea then was educating mind and body, maybe even prepping kids for secondary school.
So what got added?
A lot. Fractions, decimals, Prussian history, naturally, regional geography, natural sciences, even manual labor and agriculture, much more aligned with the standard Prussian model.
And threading through all this was the language issue, a real point of conflict, I imagine.
Absolutely central. German was the engine of Germanization. The 1872 law made it the compulsory language of instruction everywhere.
What happened to Polish?
Pushed to the margins, an auxiliary language, mainly just for teaching religion.
And the result for Polish-speaking kids?
Predictably poor, as the sources show. They often didn't understand the lessons. This led to significant resistance from Polish parents who started looking for other ways to educate their children.
Makes sense. Who was actually in charge of the schools? Did that change?
It did. Until 1872, it was mostly church authorities, parish priests, deans. They handled pedagogical supervision.
And after 1872,
The state took over completely. District and local inspectors, appointed by the government. A big move towards central control.
let's talk about the teachers themselves. What were their lives like? Tough, I'm guessing, especially early on.
Incredibly tough. Pay was very low. They often relied on payments in kind, maybe some housing, a patch of land, goods, pasture for animals. But even that wasn't always reliable or enough.
And parents sometimes held back payments?
Yes, payments meant for the school or teacher might not materialize. So teachers often had to juggle jobs. Organist, helping the priest, village clerk, just to make ends meet.
This poverty must have affected the schools directly.
Absolutely. It led to a shortage of teacher candidates, even though they desperately needed more teachers. It was a real drag on development.
Were there barriers for local kids becoming teachers?
Big ones. You needed certificates naturally, but also proof of funds. Something like 500 thalers, which was a fortune for a peasant family.
Wow. And overcrowding was a massive problem, too.
Huge. We're talking over 100, sometimes over 200. Students for a single teacher in some places. Just imagine. This led them to bring in a diwansi.
Assistant teachers.
Exactly, a diwansi. They were supposed to help, but their conditions were often really poor. They depended on the main teacher, had extra duties, and usually got landed with the youngest, largest groups.
Sounds like a tough gig for everyone involved. Did things ever get better for teachers?
Thankfully, yes. Towards the end of the century, things improved quite a bit. Salaries went up significantly after 1873.
That must have helped.
Definitely. Plus, a pension law came in 1885 for disability, or retirement at 65, and seniority bonuses started in 1890. By the late 19th century, many schools weren't just one teacher struggling alone. Infrastructure got better, too. New buildings, expansions.
So progress was made, particularly for teachers later on. But it sounds like some core problems didn't just disappear.
No, they really persisted. Low attendance, despite the laws, and overcrowding remained serious issues right into the early 1900s. There's a quote from a newspaper, the National Zeitung, in 1901.
What did it say?
It mentioned areas still having teachers with over 100 students, questioning how effective teaching or even basic upbringing could be in those conditions.
Still over 100 students in 1901. Wow.
And that compulsory German instruction, it remained a major sticking point, often ineffective for Polish kids, which just fueled more resistance from parents wanting Polish education.
So looking back at this deep dive, using Wisława Krasniowska's notebook, it reveals this really profound and often difficult transformation in Biru's schools under Prussia.
Absolutely. Driven by these big state ambitions, unity, Germanization that reshaped everything from curriculum to teacher welfare.
And it's also a story of ambition meeting, well, friction. Persistent challenges like poverty, attendance dictated by farm work, and that deep cultural resistance.
Exactly. It highlights that constant tension, doesn't it, between what the state wants and the messy, complex reality of people's lives and identities on the ground.
Which leaves us with something to think about. For you listening, how do big, state-driven education goals today shape what students and communities actually experience? And, maybe more importantly, what happens when those goals clash with local needs or identity? Definitely something worth mulling over.